Hey guys, what is going on? It is Brook, or if you may have guessed by now, the Undead DM. And in this episode, it's going to be relatively quick. I'm going to be talking about reworks, specifically class reworks in 5th edition, with a little bit of a tangent here in the middle, or to start. So I was watching a video recently by a creator who predominantly makes a lot of League of Legends content. He talked about failed reworks. And in particular, he was talking about a character that I played a lot. And how when he was reworked, it was considered a failure because they reverted a lot of the changes, or they removed all of the features in the rework that made it different. Now, here's what makes little sense to me. He said that they reverted everything, but there are still aspects of the rework that exist. It's just some of the more overtuned portions of it have been removed or changed to be more in balance. Which isn't a reversion, and it's not removing anything. It's not removing core aspects of his abilities. It's more making them in line with what they perceive the game should be, and that this was more of a testing ground. The small-scale rework was meant to be a testing ground. And that a complete reversion would be a stupid idea, because then it would be a complete failure. That would mean that the rework completely and utterly failed, and they had to go back on their decision. Completely. Not just partially, but quite literally, they just went back to a previous version of the game and just plopped that version of him into the game. And just said, oops, sorry, we fucked up. That's a complete reversion. Now, what does this have to do with D&D reworks? Well, let me tell you. So, let me ask you something. As a viewer, while playing a martial character, barbarian, fighter, rogue, monk, name me something that you do in your core action economy during combat that has nothing to do with the attack action. Nothing to do. If a feature that you are doing does not require the attack action, or it doesn't require you to make a basic weapon attack, what do you do? If the answer is barely anything, if nothing at all in the barbarian's case, then you would be correct. That is the problem right there. You do nothing except attack. You have nothing unique to yourself. The exceptions to this rule are the Arcane Trickster, the Eldritch Knight, the Battle Master, and some of the monk subclasses, like the Way of Healing, the Way of the Open Palm, I believe, and some of the other newer monk subclasses from Tasha's Cauldron. They don't have unique features outside of that. So what makes a fighter unique from a monk or a barbarian? Nothing. They both just attack with weapons or fists. There's nothing differentiating the two except for the monk has ki. That's it. There's nothing else. So, I propose, before you rework a class, ability, spell, anything, I propose to you a very simple set of questions. A set of questions that I think anyone and everyone should ask themselves prior to doing it. 1. Why are you reworking it? Is it bad? As in, it is situational, and the situations that it is useful in, there are other things that are better than it, or the situation that it comes up in is so very rare or obscure and not a lot of DMs use it to a point that it doesn't even matter that it's there? Or is it so blatantly overpowered that it can apply to literally any and all situations and is the best at that thing. So examples of very weak things are things like Illusory Script. It is a useful spell unless you have PCs or anything like that can see through illusions, that can read the illusionary script, that have true sight, or you have monsters, which typically players will try to use this against, and like devil contracts and all that, and they have true sight and they could see it anyway. Or they're just not affected by illusions. A situational spell, and the situations that it comes up in are very few and far between. Now, in the opposite spectrum, you have things like Slow. It is useful anywhere and everywhere. It debuffs enemies. It debuffs enemies according to what they are good at. It buffs martial enemies by having their movement speed, having them have a disadvantage on dex saves, minus to armor class, and it nerfs spellcasters by making them have to take an additional turn to just cast a spell. Even innate spellcasting, because it's whenever they cast a spell. It doesn't matter. So if they fail, some spellcasters, if they don't make the save, they're just kind of screwed. So it's one of the two. Is it because it's too weak or it's too strong? Number 2, is the thing that you are attempting to rework, are you trying to add to it or subtract from it? So are you trying to add things to an ability or remove things from it? Either way, you have to determine question 3. What classes can have access to this ability? So is it a martial ability like extra attack? Is it the fighter's action surge? Is it the wizard's spell list? Is it a spell that a lot of spellcasters get? What is it? And then once you answer question 3, go back to question 2 and ask yourself, do you want to take things away from it because it's too accessible, or do you want to add things to it because it's unique to the class? In either answer, go to question 4. What are you going to do about it? How are you going to rework it specifically? This is when you get to the specifics. Do you want to add a unique effect? Give it a status effect? Do you want to make it do more damage, do less damage? Do you want it to affect an area as opposed to a single creature? Do you want to affect a single creature instead of an area? What have you? So, I propose to you a solution, particularly when it comes to class reworks entirely, not just spells or abilities, but the broad spectrum of a class rework like the martials. Options are key. Everyone knows options are key. If Battlemaster was a baseline fighter feature, then we would all be okay. Fighter would be fine. The designers would have realized that fighter with Battlemaster maneuvers as a baseline class feature is perfectly acceptable, and they would have given it to all the martials. Hopefully. Maybe. I don't think they're that smart, though. They'll probably think it's too overpowered and give the wizard more spells. But I digress. Options are key. So giving the martials more options is what you should be doing. The question is, how powerful should you make them? Personally, I'm of the opinion that if you're going to give them options and lock certain abilities behind levels, you need to at least make them comparable to a level spellcaster. My favorite example of this is go onto whatever source you're using, like GM, Binder, or Home Brewery. Go on there, when you start making these maneuver style features, go open D&D Beyond or D&D 5e wiki.net and look at the spell progression, or even better, just open up the book. Open up the book, who cares? Whatever can get you to where you need to go. Just open up the book or the website and find the spell slot progression of a wizard, and then look over the spell levels, or look at the spells that equate to a similar design aspect of what your maneuver is attempting to do, and then base it off of that. So, for example, if you're making a martial and you give them a feature that they can only obtain at 6th level, go look at every spell that can be obtained at 2nd and 3rd level by a wizard and determine how powerful it needs to be. If it's a utility-based ability, you can kind of just base it off of a similar spell effect, but make it more martially, or make a unique one like I do a lot of the times. Or, if it's a damage ability, if it's something that specifically does damage, look at the highest damage and then look at the lowest damage, and then try to get it somewhere in between, but that is subject to change based on if you're reworking the casters or not, which I am. I'm basing it off of the knowledge that the spellcaster's spells are going to be nerfed. And then once you've got an idea of how it's going, you'll eventually get into a flow, start writing things down, boom, 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 and then playtest it. Most important, playtest it. Yourself, your friends, in a one-shot, have the general public playtest it. Just playtest it somehow. But that's my thoughts on reworks. I think they're a great idea, as long as you don't fully go back on them. And also, more options equals better game. Latest.